it was a very serendipitous meeting that Sajita had with Debbie that led to this wonderful exhibition of visual art and video art at the Mopla House. And it's really wonderful that we inaugurate a house full of art. So that's, and I think it really sets the tone for something quite beautiful and an experience, I think, that will be a part of the Mopla House air, as it were. I'd like to invite Debbie to say a few words, to say how we came to this house and the journey of the houses at Dakshinachitra. Thank you.
I'm delighted to see all of you. I should say that this exhibition from the Kerala Women's Artists Collective happened by serendipity. So Sajita, who has curated the exhibition, was here visiting Dakshinachitra, and she had participated in an earlier artist workshop that we had. In fact, we have a very beautiful painting of hers from quite a few years ago. And so we have this Morpa house. It's a Mapala house from Kozhikode, from Calicut. And we're looking to put an exhibition in it eventually. We have a grant from the US Consulate for an exhibition on culture and nature, but it's being stuck through our FCRA account, which has been frozen, along with about 19,000 other accounts of NGOs in India. So we are in a little bit of a quandary as to what to do, and so we didn't want to keep the house vacant. And when Sajita came, we thought it was a wonderful opportunity to showcase the art from Kerala and from women's art from Kerala, because women have a harder time getting the recognition for their art than men. Women have other problems also. They have family, they have kids, so they can't be out publicly as much as the men, but their art is just as good. And so we're delighted that we have this exhibition. So about the houses. In Kerala, we wanted to each of our sections, our state sections, have a theme by which we curated the houses. And in Kerala, we wanted to show that there's almost an equality between Muslim, Hindu, and Christian religion, the people of those religions in Kerala, and that they live harmoniously. So we had a hard time finding a Muslim house. So this Kerala Mapala house is a Muslim house, and that's why you'll see that the tinai is inside and not outside. And it's been, I think we bought it about 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 3 years ago. And then, of course, we have to get money to put the houses up. So Breaks India and Sundaram Finance came through to fund the house. And of course, as we said, the US Consulate was funding the exhibition. You might have noticed we're building another house. We're building a Kodava house, and that's being funded by Hyundai Mobis. We are an NGO, and so for a lot of our capital, for almost 99% of our capital expenditure, we have to go to the public. We are self-sufficient in operations, but not in capital expenditure and special works. So what we do is, basically, before we opened, we did 8 years of research on architecture in all the 4 states, 2 years in each state. And then we identified the houses which we felt were typical of a region with at least 100, usually 100 villages. Now Kozhikode is a city, but it is quite a typical Muslim house, though there are older Muslim houses with slightly different, particularly windows, than what we have in this house. This house is, because you'll see the stained glass and the arches, it is a colonial influenced house, and it was built just at the turn of the century in 1900. And we hope you like it. It's quite a procedure to put up a house, because when we take a house down, we number each piece of wood, and then we have to clean the wood and polish it at the end, and it's quite an ordeal. But usually it comes out quite beautifully. So we're very happy that the initial exhibition in this house is women's art. Makes me very happy. And we hope you all enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I'd like to invite Sajita, the artist and curator, to give us an overview. Sajita is not unfamiliar to Chennai. She's lived here for close to 2 decades. And as Debbie said, the houses are really both a labor of love and purpose, much like I think this 3-month exhibition will be. So Sajita, if you could give us an overview of the show.
Very happy to see all of you. And 18 years back I left Chennai, and now I am back with this exhibition. And I must say thank you to thank you very much for this invitation to curate this project. I am not new to this place at all, and 18 years ago Debbie invited me for a women artist camp. Do you remember that? Yes. Yeah, that women artist camp, I think I did an installation and painting. And that time we were talking about the women artists, the museum or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, now after 18 years, when I visited Dakshinachitra on July 27th, so I got this invitation, and this time I brought 27 women artists from Kerala along with me from the Women Visual Artists Collective, Kerala. This collective came into being during the pandemic, and I felt that it is a historical moment and I must promote it. So Jalaja is one of the artists who took the initiative to start the collective, and she is here today. And this Kavitha's talk will give us a very historical clarity to the exhibition also. And I think along with the exhibition we can talk more about details, and thank you very much. And I'm welcoming Kavitha to give the talk, and I think Anita ji is going to introduce Kavitha in a very detailed way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajita. So I'll give us a short background of Kavitha. So Kavitha Balakrishnan is an artist, bilingual author and art educator based in Kerala. She has done her MFA in art history from M S University Baroda in 1998. Her PhD is on the illustrated print culture of 20th century India, specifically the periodicals which have been published in Malayalam. Since 2000, Kavitha engages with the changing scenario of practicing, writing and educating art and art history in India, contributing critical reviews in both Malayalam and English. Her articles are widely published in major Indian journals of art like Marg, Art and Deal, Take on Art, and also in peer-reviewed journals such as the Journal of Illustration Research Intellect, coming from London. She has 3 collections of Malayalam poetry to her credit. Kavitha finds her artistic language at the crossroads of the disciplines of art, art history, and poetry. So now over to Kavitha for her talk on the Kalakari.
Good afternoon, all of you. Thank you, Debbie, Sharath, and Anita, and all of you, each and every one of you here at Dakshinachitra, for giving us an opportunity to show our works here, and also for me to present a small paper here. So this is actually not simply about our present show. It is actually about our own lives in relation to the whole scenario of international and national, and by all means, in terms of every context you can think of, that we can think of ourselves. So I'm thinking of that kind of a context in this paper. A person's individual artistic activity is also marked by the changes of the society in which one lives. Today, I'm surrounded by an interconnectedness of so many painters, living and past, that engage with the concept of art history in their differences and similarities. I seek inspiration from the interdependent positions of being an artist, a woman, a citizen, and a human being. This presentation tests the possibility of an independent investigation to various languages of art, what one may call as a cultural map of Kalakari. I have originally done this attempt in Malayalam during the global pandemic times and published as short video series. They were regularly published in the FB pages in Poetria, a platform for poetry by Kerala Penkavigal. Those were also the times when a few young women artists from the younger generation in Kerala wanted to make a WhatsApp group of women artists in and from Kerala. They thought that this digital space could possibly enable an intimacy for sharing not only their artworks among themselves, but also all their thoughts on life, art, profession, politics, dreams, conflicts, ideals, everything. I also joined the group. That is the Women Artists Collective, Women Visual Artists Collective. That gave me a considerable exposure to the thoughts, ambitions, resistances, compassionate togetherness of existing among my fellow artists who are also women. It was and is still a learning experience. Meanwhile, I read a column in Mathrubhumi Weekly regarding the premises of the gender politics in visual arts. It raised with some questions and thoughts fundamental to our practice, I believe. So let me cite a few of those questions and thoughts here. I am not in this history. Where is my art history? What were the women artists' gestures for imagining and accessing a public domain in 20th century? How does a woman practice in the genealogies of monumental public sculptures? How has it been a woman-only world of many laborers? Creative men ever worked in a female perspective? What really are those women who reimagine social and historical memories? Actually, what are they doing? How do the women build bridges between experience and language, art language? What all new images you find in the cultural map of Kalakari that very young women artists are making today? How does a woman artist studio look like? What is the power politics of male gazes that women recognize and deal with today? What is the shape of the crowd engineered by new age gender politics? How does a woman artist in the political stream of consciousness look like? What are the regime changes of art and creativity happening today that has to situate some women in a new political understanding? How does one open up the possibilities of a cultural history of sensory perspective or sensory experience from a female perspective? How does a woman poignantly expose the shadows of fascism? And after all, what is meant by a woman artist now? I cannot extensively present these questions and thoughts here. All these questions cannot be dealt with. I had compiled each of these thoughts in Malayalam articles. Pustaka Prasadaka Sangham published the collection of these articles in the form of this book. Here, I'm going to quickly give you a glance through the way I deal with these questions in this book. I'm also presenting 4 videos as part of this display, Beyond Being Woman, because I believe that reimagining art history is also a creative journey, informed and tested by a historical moment that one lives in. Before addressing a few of these questions I raised here, let me clarify the term Kalakari that I am using here. The first ever criticism against such attempt could be, why study only women artists from history? It is only a biased, lopsided view, because there is a strong general sense that what is needed is a holistic view of art and life, not sectarian views. But I would call it a false position that the paternalistic humanist view of art has generally cultivated so far. But that is where most epistemologies of art are focused. That is where the dichotomy of high art and low art emerges. That is where men and women, imagination and reason are divided. But just as nature and culture are. So it is in this false position that feeling and thought, craft and art, tradition and modernity, all split into two in 20th century. Historically, the common sense has been the absolute as a narrow domain of high art. The vast majority of world's people are excluded from this humanist art history, developed by white men, basically. Aggregation is only a tool used to construct a sectional art history of Euro-American white man. Then there is a fair question as to what is the point of considering this sectarianism with another sectarianism? So, the word Kalakari used here is not as a gender form opposed to the male artist. The word Kalakari is also not used here as a category that can be taken literally as just a woman who engages in any activity, known such as painting, sculpture, photography, installation, mural painting, fabric, etc., etc. That can be counted by default an artistic activity. The term Kalakari is used here as a very historically relative concept. It operates with a deep consciousness in a world that is partly constructed by the practices of male domination. So that is historically relative kind of view. In individual artistic practice, it may be possible for one to imagine a position outside of this patriarchal consciousness. But it must also be considered that in its actuality, that also falls back on institutional forms that have not cancelled this patriarchal consciousness. So the lofty humanist false positioning that art has no gender won't help here. Taking a simplistic partisan position in the lines of the same gendering, just being woman and artist, also won't help us. Because the history of imagination is a vast collection of stories, experiences, memories, and objects in a gendered world. It is a continuity that cannot be easily cancelled. So the fundamental question here is, what it is like to be a female in a world where being human is unconsciously read as being a man? The concept of Kalakari or a woman artist will work here not as a person, but as a historically relative and critical idea of gender politics. I prefer using the word Kalakari than the word woman artist because Kalakari is a word that can basically be derived from most of the Indian vernaculars. So the term can also contain the politics of regions, nativities, and site specificities of the female existences. I also wish to develop the term Kalakari as a collective framework that not only in India, but also internationally deals with contemporary gender conflicts of various localities. So I'm speaking from such a premise on Kalakari. Let's consider the first question. I'm not in this history. Where is my art history? Let me quote from a moment when an art student recognized two places where her future as an artist in America in 1960s collided. Those two areas were history and educational methods. The student's name was Judy Chicago. I was a graduate student then. I decided to take a course called Intellectual History of Europe. The professor who taught that subject was highly respected. He had promised to speak in the last class about the contribution of women to Western thought. I waited that whole semester for that. Finally, the day came, the teacher entered, thus announced, contribution of women to Western thought? No such thing. I was devastated by this verdict. My investigations later showed that the professor's conclusion did not stand up to the intellectual scrutiny. Another idea that came with it is that there has never been a female artist who achieved greatness in history. All this is just prejudice, mere prejudice masquerading as dogma. People believe this only because there is no other view around. The research I began then has turned into a huge treasure trove of information on women's history. That made me stronger. My discoveries are presented through my artwork. I'm also amazed at how visual image can change preconceived notions about women and history. Unquote. The invisibility of women who changed the course of history baffled Judy Chicago in 1960s. She convinced
those around her that there was a complete injustice in history being blamed for a woman and that there was a need for a solution. Chicago's quest changed the course of American art history in a sense. There is a prevailing notion among us that the work of art should be magnificent in itself and that it should not be tarnished by anything outside of it. In the American context, abstract art was appropriate for all this. And such notions were encouraged by huge capitalist forces. Let me quote John Hay Whitney, president of the Museum of Modern Art, then. Because it could strengthen, inspire, and train the wills of free men, art is a national defense of American capitalism. Abstract art was the cultural arm of American diplomatic service. The founder of this museum, which created the art world market in 1929, was a woman, Abby Aldrich Rockefeller. On the other hand, the 60s were a time of new artistic languages that overturned all these prestige of capitalist nationalism in art. The kind of happenings that complement the work of art with audience interactions, installation art projects, pop art, etc., revolutionized that American social life. Art is the original thought of a loner, but not only that. When social experience intervene, collective art arise as projects. Both have different emphasis. It was this situation that Judy Chicago was able to throw a mysterious question to the people around her. That means I'm not in this history, where is my history? In the past, women's suffragette struggles and labor struggles have raised the issue of this women's history in Europe and America. This question of Chicago in art later became a central one in feminist art thought. Maybe these are all new, not new for you, but then I want this solid background to propose the other stuff I'm going to propose. From 1974 to 79, the popular artwork dinner party was experimental in educational projects based on women's history in Chicago. Marked in another art history, it was also a response to the teacher trying to convey a patriarchal information as a data normalized in class. It was not the work of an isolated individual. By questioning why some people are excluded from idealistic glories because they are women, Chicago was building a new fraternity in the artistic path. Hundreds of volunteers joined Chicago in their quest to find great women from history. Her question continued to inspire young, up-and-coming American artists in the 80s and 90s. The dinner party is a triangular in shape, arranged like a dinner table. It featured plaques dedicated to 39 important women who changed the course of human history. Another 999 names were engraved on the table. From the Babylonian fertility goddess to her older American contemporary, Georgia O'Keeffe, were represented on plates at this dinner party. Each plate is accompanied by tablecloths, beautifully embroidered with their names. A sacred theme flourished in it all, almost like food. They are actually glazed ceramic figures, but they look like vaginas, like flowers. Women are invisible laborers who work in the food system as part of the family maintenance. Men's labor is valued more in the general commodity system of the same food. A woman's and man's relationship with a food plate differs. Chicago's concept of the dinner table evolved into indications that women's presence was in every way to reproduce and nurturing processes. In the world, a man's sexual experience is seen as a sign of power and intelligence, while a woman's agency in sexual experience is portrayed as vulgar. There, even a hint of yoni is considered obscene. The imagery of the flower is widespread in public life as a popular signifier of respectable female sexuality. In Chicago's installation, the amputated female sexuality is seen blooming like a flower. Let me make a cut now to the context of 1960s Kerala to consider another question I raised. What were the women artists' gestures for imagining and accessing a public domain? There is an interesting testimony today regarding artist T.K. Padmini, the sole icon of the woman artist from 20th century Kerala. Let me quote a reflective writing of her uncle T.K. Divagaran on her about her apparently suppressed desire as a woman in a rural setting in the 60s Kerala for going to Madras to study art. My dear niece will come up with a cup of tea. I will look at her face. Her face will be pale as a tea in the cup. I remembered the picture of the little Padmini when she was in school, wearing a small shirt and carrying a bundle of books. Today, Padmini does not have the energy of those days. I am an artist. There was only this single request in those eyes, that you should raise me. My mind also became dumb. Finally, it was I who decided that the decision was taken that it was that of a head of the house. Everyone agreed to that. Padmini's eyes lit up, and she was told that she was going to study at the Madras College of Arts and Crafts. This is what Padmini's uncle, T.K. Divakaran, had written. The painter is represented as an affective impression here, inflicted on the modern man as well as on a literate man. Determined in part by the progressive consciousness of the male world, the standards of art were experienced differently by men and women. In certain instances in our collective and personal histories, much unlike male artist persona, woman artist was then not the central hero or personality for herself. Women then couldn't address the history address the country or a society that she could even leave behind. The concept of the country and the public domain were by and large male imaginaries of a colonial modern times. So a woman is not always an artistic persona that has all rights to grow up completely. Likewise, the notion of the native place is also a half-grown idea. No land was supposed to be experienced brilliantly by a woman in patriarchy unless and until she finds a way to forcefully break in. So it must be Padmini's need to present this half-grown experience of the land as a gesture for accessing a more evolved civil life, if not a public domain, so to say, which we are still halfway. That gesture is readable in her works. That is only one point I am presenting today about Padmini. In the 1950s and 60s, I would say that the painter T.K. Padmini had depicted a domain at the liminality of our imaginations of a public domain. I mean, we find humans, men and women alike, trees, ponds, rivers, animals, all could be living in a profound idea of the merging and dissolving insides and outsides, the public and the private, in Padmini's painting. Unlike the painters at that time around, Padmini's paintings were not inspired by the theatrical domesticity of the compositions of Raja Ravi Varma or the European generic painters. The women she painted were not domesticated. Her classroom studies were rather influenced by the surrounding modern Indian painting, its art school academicism of the post-independence period, and the Madras school's then revolutionary pursuits. But then, her pictorial language is not fully defined by any of these influences, I would say. Her drawings and oil paintings on hardboard show their origins from another shore. The idea of either portraying everything around or doing formal distortions in some ways was common in the art of that time. The warp and woof of Padmini's artistic language as a painter explored some maternal order of expressive shadows, darkness, and subtle patches of senses that are missing around. Padmini has often shown an ecosystem that accommodates many and others. Even when thinking of a woman and a man together as two people, it is not family order that the male artist around her tried to inhabit. Like the male artist used to do. A photographic, picturesque, photogenic family portrait with status symbols, etc. Padmini as a painter touched the changing Indian situation as distinct from a male world around her that was reforming into a patriarchal value system using modernity, signs, and symbols. Her master, K.C.S. Panikar, used words and symbols to imagine Indian native and southern experience. In Padmini's paintings, the sense of the region is not seen as a problematically primitive belonging. Beyond that, Padmini reached at the sanctuary of a painterliness as a woman of her time would reach. She arrived at painterliness, I would say. It was not natural for her. It was very effortful for her. Look at the textured roughness imparted by the architectonics of the village and the sort of warmth imparted by the seasons, the snake groves and the river banks. Let me cut this into another setting, where a woman chooses to illustrate a world that has all laboring women but men. How has it been a woman-only world of many labors? What kind of experience is it to a woman to be a woman in a world where being human is unconsciously read as being man? Being a woman has spanned not just one but many paths. If you go through one of them, surprisingly, you won't see any male subjects. A world without men. We cannot resort to the trick of saying that this path belongs to sectarian thinkers, because all the women seen in these painted illustrations are constantly engaged in each and every activity, just like human beings. Women, just like human beings, laboring, and laboring. They are hard-working. You can also see the works that they have taken are also very distorted and dysfunctional often. Their world is apparently filled with autobiographic emotions. Their heads are like storage space that opens automatically from time to time. It is filled with other people. The people who are women who carry loads of expectations that they cannot bear. They are parables of each crisis they face every day. They build inhabitants working in the void. They build habitats working in the void. Every now and then, the bricks would come close to the walls they build. The world of authoritarianism and its history must have made them helpless. Because of this, they have descended into the underworld of their lives and see only themselves. Unlike looking at nature from a perspectival distance, here nature has literally come into a woman's bodies and opened their mouths. They mend tigers. They gather the beasts sleeping from their loins. They ride on elephants walking with their trunks loaded. These works are done by an artist called Amy Cutler. The sequences that Amy Cutler draws in meticulous detail on white paper, illustrations they look like, in the style of popular literary illustrations, It is a magical world where the impossible happens. These pictures are full of people doing seamlessly useless, terrifying tasks. In the genealogies of imagination, fairy tale heroines have certain status. The elopement of the princess from the father's house with her lover and the slave girl who endured injustices and finally marries the king are always thrilling stories. Unlike the epics, which are heroic tales of men, the fairy tales often bring good fortune to helpless females. Theirs is a magical world. This magic is often decisive in the folk ways of defining what it is to experience being a woman in this world. That they take us to another question. How do women build bridges between experience and language? Art is generally said to be the free expression of experiences. What is art for someone who simultaneously experiences racial, sexual, and historical oppression all together? Not all carry on with the history that buried them. On the contrary, their generations may try to give a dignified new visibility to the lineages that were invisible in the darkness of that history. Then a question arises, what is really unseen in the great humanist history? Not simply some people or some races. They are actually visible in somebody's representation. They are visible profusely, actually, but not for their sense of artistic agency. That is a problem. Women, slaves, and poor are more or less represented artistically and profusely in many republics that are built on capitalism, that are built on communist socialist experiments, that are built on democracies like ours. Everywhere you find this, women, slaves, and poor are more or less represented artistically and profusely, but not in their terms. What needs to be politically emerging as paintings, sculptures, and prints are actually human experiences that have been buried by powerful systems. What is truly invisible in human history is the humiliations suffered by certain people and certain races as a whole. That means being denied the right to every best resource in life. That includes the artistic agency. Seen from that invisible but possible underworld of art, museums are Seen from that invisible but possible underworld of art, museums are the grand graves that human history has produced, and where most of the great works of art are known to exist. All kinds of imperialisms claim that the treasures of art are the achievements of their humanity. It is not to say that these great humanist histories of art are irrelevant. Actually, they are more relevant because a few art museums in the world today recognize the irony of their own existence as graveyards in history. There is a contemporary tendency among some of the world's most famous museums to give up their own pseudo-authenticity that they have acquired through racial supremacy in the art world, and they want to open to the experience of the new world. When I saw some of the works by artist Labaina Hamid in person, I first felt that they were part of such a museum trend. Labaina is a 2017 Turner Prize winner. Born on East African island of Zanzibar, which was once a British protectorate, Labaina was an artist who largely shaped the black art movement in the UK in 1980s. In front of the existing gilt-framed oil paintings in the Walker Art Gallery, Liverpool, I saw some cutouts of men emerging from the slave trading history of that city. It is not difficult to understand the political experience of Labaina's quote-unquote invasion of that museum space by these large cutouts. And I know I was one of those people who went to that gallery from a country that repeats that old third world habit of covering one's poverty from first world with plastic blankets. The language of cutout is widely present in our popular culture, from movie theaters to the good old greeting cards. It becomes art when a space is used in a socially critical way, when invisible social relations are visualized in detail. Cutouts in art is not the expression of something natural and popular. Cutouts in art, it indicates the presence of something different from the circumstances. It may be out of conflicting postures. For any human race that has gone through unnatural social changes without the right for self-determination, the irreverence and flexibility of cutout imagery offers great potential to engage in its emancipatory processes. This imagery helps them not only to deify their vanished leaders, but also to recreate themselves with human dignity, but by scrupulously observing them from dark, forgotten cultural sources. What is this human dignity then? It is the awakening that every human being who deals with the oppressive situation achieves. It is expressed in a particular place and time. An early instance of Labaina's approach to this language can be found in a work called Fishing. On the wall is a cutout of a female figure running away while engaging in fresh fishing. About it, she says, quotation, "Women's relationship with time is one of planning. They work in small pockets of time. They have to think about life and death, not family, every day. It can sometimes be overwhelming and downright depressing. We women used to sit and think about ourselves regarding what we could do to make a life feeling a little better." So, leisured resting, quotations over, leisured resting is not an insignificant surplus value here. It is an expression of existence. Fishing, for example. Taking a rest from something can only be experienced by those who face terrible conditions. One must constantly think about how to be safe in a room with only one wall. Losing all sense of reality, the black woman's rest is an attempt at the face of terror. Those who are not used to seeing it like that, can sometimes experience the horror in the museum. But when the works of women and the underdogs in art come face to face, New conversations about life and history begin from there. There is a work called Freedom and Change by Labaina Himid, citing a Picasso painting. She says, "I did it in the kitchen. There was no spare room in those days just for drawing. Household items were involved in the artwork and in my thinking. I was virtually at war with the artwork. The only hope was to make it to the art gallery. Artwork is not the end of anything. It is the beginning. I'm really interested in the conversations that start from where the artwork shows up." Quotation over. Women bathing, looking in the mirror, dancing, all are prominent themes in European oil painting traditions. But Picasso painting, called Two Women Running Along the Beach, is different from those figures of laziness. We all know that. It is headlong race of two strong-looking young women. But it can be assumed that Picasso's caution to break with the artistic tradition of reproductions was due in large part to the intensity of these strokes. So, according to the image of a modern artist who is completely independent of traditional tastes, the studio, materials, girlfriends, and biographies are all main topics of the Picasso discourse that has followed in 20th century. The desire for a great work of art is actually the reason behind the magic of the concept of an artist studio. It is not really a domestic space, not even a public space, it is a liminal space. Then, let me make another cut into the question. How does a woman artist studio look like? The cover image of, sorry, I had missed that cover image here, but this is another image. The cover image of Sajida R. Shankar's exhibition catalogue, Paintings and Drawings, 1993-95, marked a new lease in the Kerala history of women as artists. That cover image belonged to somebody who had envisioned an artistic career. That image also is similar to this, but different. That cover image belonged to somebody who had envisioned an artistic career for herself, though that looked a very, very uneasy proposition. A woman in a kurta and jeans is drawing, almost with her back to the viewer. On the canvas fixed to the easel, you can see emotional faces of men and women painted by her. The back cover shows the little girl sleeping in the corner of the room. Those in her circle of acquaintance know that it is Sajita's daughter, Shilpi. But only when the book is spread and looked at, one realizes that both are sides of the same picture of a same moment. Then you will see the image of a painter emerging from a woman's real life environment. Moreover, it is clear that the artist's representations do not use the usual signifiers of motherhood and femininity. The cover was announcing that a painter's studio might be rare in a society at that time, but it was not unusual. And we all know that she came to a place where there are so many studios of artists. So that was a conscious choice. Be it the friends who engage in conversations or the art buyers or art lovers, the artist studios were places where those who are invited to travel and stay in other parts of the world can come and go. 20th century male artists were leaving their place and home for such a liminal experiment. Such space is not purely domestic or public in nature, but a householder has no natural right to break away from something institutional as family. Perhaps because of this, an aversion to not simply those spaces haunted by domestication, but any systemic structure of spaces an aversion to such spaces is ingrained in the generations of women artists today. There are people functioning from virtual studio spaces today, social media, etc. A new generation of women visual artists emerged from such studios too, mobile, social media, etc. This is also a moment when women working as artists started reimagining the so-called progressive Renaissance histories of their social spaces. If T.K. Padmini painted a more or less utopian coexistence, Sajida Shankar had started politicizing it and achieved a professional life as an artist. And here is a time when younger artists paint their heterotopias. Heterotopia is a concept all of you must be knowing, developed by Michael Foucault to describe certain cultural, institutional, and discursive spaces that are somehow other, disturbing, intense, incompatible, contradictory, and transforming. Then the next question comes, what is the shape of the crowd engineered by New Age gender conflicts? It is important for women in general today not only to understand the cultural engineering of the age they are living in, but also to find a way to discursively insert themselves into it. It is not yet, it's not yet easy for the artist, woman artist, to get the help of the system solely for her own artistic agency. Finding that way, however, is a long process. It is the construction of creative visions that articulate one's position and social dealings according to will. Check out this 30-foot-long artwork, Tug of War, 2013. Humans are involved in a huge tug of war in this painting. Some put up defense with their bodies and minds, stepping into the line, hands by sides, leaning over, feet tucked in these like muscles flexor. Sari tucked in, checking his grip on the rope, teeth gritted, peering across, circus clown, coat-topped, corporate, turbaned, and hooded, whatnot. This is a huge line of people. Like the robe, the image or the work of art itself is long, 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 and uncomfortably sized. But there is no way for the audience to identify the people in the two sides of this painting. There are many types of people in both sides. In other words, the painter is not the maker of this war. This is an indication of that. Only the makers of war will accurately show identifiable opponents. Here is shown the bodies strained by intriguing opposition. The circumstances that pushed them into it may have been beyond their control. Globalization has brought people from different corners together in unfamiliar places. They are also marked by the brands they wear, the color of their skins, the codes of their cultural and political belonging. Where they come from is irrelevant. It is relevant, as their plural origins visible at one social space. The notions of progressive development, social renaissance, or reformation turn more complex here. It is ironic, hybrid, or even sometimes comic to imagine a new social imagery from such a conflict-ridden domain of the public, originated in patriarchal modernity and grown through late capitalism. This painting, and this one, done by P.S. Jalaja. Kerala Renaissance paintings are P.S. Jalaja's interpretation of the Renaissance discourses that have taken place in the cultural world of Kerala in the last decade. The cultural intellectual M. N. Vijayan is wearing a pearl necklace and nightie. Chembai Vaidanatha Bhagavathar wearing a t-shirt and another shirt in addition to his comrade Krishna Pilla. T.K. Padmini in a bright yellow sari. Brahmananda Shivayogi in a t-shirt with the Che Guevara face painted on it. Nitya Chaitanya Yati in a ruffled shirt. There are so many, it's a series. Narayana Guru in a silk sari. In a sense, this is a fascinating cross-dressing masquerade, happening perhaps in the artist's mind. If we look closely at each of them, all these masquerading icons show certain exposition of life that was generally invisible, or largely resisted in the scheme of thought of many of these icons. This masquerading was largely resisted and largely invisible in the scheme of thought of so many great icons. Many of the Renaissance and progressive leaders showed a sense of renunciation, caution against indulgences, and that included women. Narayana Guru tried his level best to keep women away from his scheme. But he was a great devotee of goddess Kali. Creative women had to later speak in double tongue, like Kamala Das. Cross-dressing is a playful ploy in Jalaja's painting here.
Even Kamala Das were playing. She was also very playful. She was also double-tongued. She was also playing like anything. That looks like a metaphoric reversal of gender roles in order to expose the irony of those habitually exclusive male stereotypes or of cultural heroes. These are apparently loud critical expressions of social engineering in the times we realize as also subtly fascist. So we may also ask another question. How does a woman poignantly expose the shadows of fascism? I would request your attention to a war journal posted in social media by a woman from Odessa, a city in currently war-ridden Ukraine. Lina Stern refers to herself in social media as a peculiar artist, designer, photographer. Her areas of interest are visual art, design, literature. Yesterday, when I was preparing this talk, her war journal is going through its 579th day. Yesterday's journal says thus: after tonight in Odessa, the hotel in the seaport is now dilapidated. Several granaries, a port building, and houses were also damaged. Tonight, Odessa was again attacked by 12 calibers, a family of Russian cruise missiles, 2 Onyxes, another variety of cruise missiles, and 19 drones. I don't feel sorry for the hotel. It is a product of Soviet aesthetics, which was not loved in the city. But I feel sorry for those 2 dead people who just worked at night. So that is the entry of her yesterday. She adds some images of art from her daily routine. This was the image she added for this entry. It reads thus: Atlantida, Asemic pages from Solang Long art book, September. This is an unexpected and different war journal. These are not snapshots of tragedies. The pictures and words described in it are not from war fronts, hospitals, and violence. They are sensitive to the sunshine, the shadows, the seasons, the trees. It is about the grand scheme of time and nature that heals the wounds of a person thrown into situations of war. There lies also the scope for a writing that is not impatient to make sense. A writing, whenever we write, we are impatient to make some sense of it. Here there is no such impatience. The asemic writing. Asemic writing is a wordless, open, semantic form of writing. The word the word asemic means having no specific semantic content, or without the smallest unit of meaning. With the non-specificity of asemic writing, there comes a vacuum of meaning, which is perhaps left for the reader to fill in and interpret. This is different from the loud anti-fascist, anti-war slogans around us, also created by the system. War for economic market land resources, genocide and terrorism have already produced many photographic fetish objects around us. Disaster photographs and depictions of damage, often as real as eyewitness accounts of the truth as they are from the battlefield, can make great claims about morality. In places with democracy and multicultural formats of life, those arguments provide an attractive selling point for the critical cultural forms embedded in capitalism. But they actually betray themselves because they do little to resolve conflicts. They are called fetish because of the combination of magic and commodification. Anti-war political slogans also should be blamed on the media industry, which plays between lies and truth. It needs photos that shake the world conscience with reference to history and memory. No dictator in the world is afraid of this fetish archive. Yeah, no matter any dictator is afraid of her, Lina Stern in her daily updates of War Journal offers a woman's perspective, I think, that yields no such specific semantic of anti-war content. It offers great insights, rather, into the way societies overcome tragedies by self-organization, as she calls it.
This is also another entry. For instance, when a power failure happens in a shopping mall, people organize themselves in such a way as to avoid chaos. In a war-ridden Odessa, this is what is happening. In one of her journal entries, I read this. When we see the heights of a people's aspirations for peace in reality, the downfalls they experience are more genuinely evident. The severing of power supply and communication links create an impoverished presence in people's lives of the alternative systems they try to construct for survival. So the fascist governments know they cut the power supply, they cut the communication system. That is the first ever war they are doing on their people. Then candles are used as alternative lights. As they create fields of light at night, Lena Stern sets her sights on extraordinary beauty without lowering the standard of life. She writes ironically. Yes, like this. The series called Light Mandala can be found in this war journal over several days. In art history, mandala art is a tantric geometric surface construction representing the cosmos. They are super physical routines to meditate and attain peace. But here it is a context of a forced power cut during the war that creates this beauty of the visual realm. In another blog, Lena wrote about the philosophical imaginary of the noosphere, defined as the extremes of biosphere development caused by the relationship between society and nature. It is a notion that human thought and scientific reasoning combine to produce geological close-ups. It is the next level of planetary evolution driven by human dreams. Here, Lena says, the dream is the activity of the imagination and the freedom to choose what you want. For example, it is as if one chooses between fear and beauty at a moment. The point here is the evolution of this earth into a place of free and happy dreamers will not be so difficult, but every war slows it down. Lena Stern's war journal is a combination of such writing and vision. I can go on cutting from this into another realm, the realm of Cyborg Manifesto, initiated by Donna Haraway, or from there to another place. Seamless cuts are possible into such specificities of female thinking in history. This representation, I think I can go on and on, but in this presentation, it was a humble attempt to propose a methodology, a stream of consciousness to articulate the political female genealogies across spaces, times, and locations. Through the invisibilities, through the spaces we create, through the imagination and dream that we create, through the strategies for peace that we create, the visual and verbal strategies we create. So these are all female genealogies. I don't think we need to put our life in terms of a country's art history, in terms of an international art history, in terms of a global, quote-unquote, market art history. We women have such freedom to think of everything, cutting across all these, and think of a female imaginary, where I'm sure men will be part of. Because men cannot be away from this. Men are inclusive in this structure, I think so. In the book I mentioned earlier, only one man I refer to was Devi Prasad, the ceramist Gandhian. On this day, I should remember him. But there are many men also in the scheme. So ours is not a team of women coming into a gallery and showing all women artworks. Our intellectual capital is still much resisted, so we are all women because of convenience. But we also have conflicts. We are human beings. So all our conflicts are to be dealt with.
because we are living in such a conflicting world, contradictory and ironic world, so our language will carry it shamelessly. Our language will carry it shamelessly, I would say. We are not for any ideals. So this is the only thing I want to tell and present, the idea I want to present before you. If you have any questions, I can take, but I think it's not such an academic space, but still.
So thank you, Kavitha, for this absolutely engrossing and illuminating talk. As you said, the Kalakari really traveled in space and time and across all kinds of geographical points, but all which serve, I think, to tell us the richness and the nuances of what. And I think it's a very powerful orientation before we move to the Mopla Gallery for the show. And I think inadvertently it also points to something that we discussed earlier, that is a crisis that is there in our region, which is the absence of art historians, a proliferation of artists, and the absence of art historians, and the importance of more and more art history. We might have time for one question, if are there any questions? If not, we can slowly wrap up and we can all take a short walk to the Mopla house where we'll have the official inauguration. Thank you all for coming. So please join us to the Mopla house. Thank you.